Welcome to a new series called Sunday Sets, where we look at all the data sets that are going to be released this week that could have an impact on the Australian economy. So let's get into it. So first up, we have the Melbourne Institute Inflation Gauge, month over month figure. So obviously it's measured every month. So this looks at the change in the price of goods and services purchased by consumers. So it's viewed through the consumer's lens. So this is meant to mimic the quarterly release of CPI that comes from the ABS. Obviously in Australia, we don't get a monthly figure for CPI, so it's important to get that month to month track. So this is really important data that's coming out. So this is released monthly and usually the Monday after the month ends, but we had a bit of a holiday period with Christmas and New Year's now, so obviously it's coming out a bit later. So let's see how this comes out. We then move into the Westpac Consumer Sentiment Report. So obviously consumer sentiment is one of the most important economic indicators around. It's released usually on the second Tuesday of the current month. So obviously looking at how consumers are feeling towards the economy. It's a survey of 1,200 consumers, which asks them about their consumption and what they plan future consumption is going to be. So really important one, this one. We then have another Melbourne Institute data release. This time around, it's the consumer inflation expectations. So obviously, it's looking at where consumers are expecting inflation to be in the next 12 months. So inflation is a pretty key topic at the moment, central to what the Reserve Bank is doing with interest rates. This data is released monthly, usually the second Thursday after the month ends. This week we also have two employment-related data sets released by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, or the ABS. So the first one is the employment change. So obviously this measures the change in the number of people employed during the previous month. So this data set's released 15 days after the end of the month. Same with the corresponding one that comes out, which will be the unemployment rate. So the unemployment rate is obviously just the percentage of the total workforce that is actively seeking work or unemployed during the previous month. So we look at this data set, they're both going to be critical to the RBA's decision in February around interest rates, and it's going to help them decide whether they see the interest rate policy settings that they took last year having effect and impacting the labour force. So we'll see what comes out of that. The last domestic indicator that's released this week is the Conference Board Leading Index month over month. So this is a measure of a composite of 7 different economic indicators. So this is released 50 days after the month ends. It's less so important compared to other ones, mostly because this data is already released in the system beforehand and then comes out later. We then have one of the annual economic events, probably the most prominent in the world, which is the World Economic Forum that occurs in Davos each year. So this is attended by central bankers, prime ministers, finance ministers, and trade ministers from around 90 different countries. So we'll see what comes out of this, especially around inflation. It's probably going to be important. It's not a really busy economic news week this week, but there are a few key things that are coming out. So Davos and the unemployment rate are the two key ones. They're probably going to have the biggest impact across the board, and just looking at where the direction of the economy is heading this year. So let's see how they go. Like, subscribe, and comment for more.